You know, meeting people where they're at has been crucial. And one of the things I've learned in some of my leadership cohorts and just traveling the state is that we have to listen. And it's so cliche. Everyone is like, it's all about listening. Is number one. You have to understand where people are coming from in order to have a discussion, in order to see where they're coming from on certain topics. So
hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. All right, awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I've missed being on here. I've been gone traveling at the Southern Hemp Expo and the Grow Trade Fest up in Missouri. And so I got my good fix on people face to face, and I've missed it. I've missed being able to talk to people. And so it's good to be back here and sharing what we have going on. And I'm excited to introduce Kelly today to everybody today and share what you have working on. But for those of you that are joining us, please let us know where you're coming from. Drop a little note to say hello, and then follow us, subscribe on our YouTube channel, where you can find all of our videos. And then also we've launched our hemphallway.com platform for people to connect and build relationships, find all of our upcoming events, memberships, things like that. And also on Patreon for less than a cup of coffee. You can join Patreon for $4 and just support the content that we're putting out. And so I encourage you guys to go out and do that. But without further ado, Kelly, welcome. Thank you very much. And let us know. Tell me a little bit about yourself, or share with the audience. What have you been up to, and how'd you get into this? How'd you get into this position now?
Mandi, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I have been involved with, or I guess have known about cannabis and industrial hemp since I was around the age of 12 or 13. It was in the 90s. I was an 80s kid, grew up in the 90s, and had DARE class, and I'd go home from school and have conversations with my folks. And one of them went something like, what do you guys know about this plant, marijuana, that we keep hearing about? And that was when my dad told me about the research that he was involved with in the 70s at K-State. So he was getting a biology degree, and he volunteered for some research where they studied different ways to eradicate hemp, or what they thought was marijuana. And one of the things I remember he told me was, it doesn't go away. They would try different methods of killing it. It always came back. And so that always kind of stuck in my mind. We were this generation of being told, you're going to save the planet. You're going to get the fossil fuels transition, get the plastics out of the ocean and all this. And yet we were trying to kill a plant that we knew grew well in our state. And you can find hemp at my family's farm up north. And I mean, it just grows all over wild. So that didn't make sense to me. And it started me on this path of trying to understand humanity's relationship with the plant and what that has really meant for society as a whole. And so I've gone to I've been traveling to Colorado my whole life with family, going on fishing trips. But since legalization, I've gone to conferences. I went to the National Cannabis Summit in Denver, the CannaGrow Expo. I also represented Kansans for hemp after I co-founded that company at NOCO Hemp Expo in Colorado. So, I mean, I've known people in the industry for several years now. I had represented Kansas at the World Hemp Congress in Slovenia. After discovering this research that my father had told me about when I was younger, and I'll get to that, but that's kind of like in a nutshell how I came to all of this. It's really been part of my upbringing in a lot of ways, and it's just led me to a lot of unique opportunities. And so I'm happy to be here.
I love it. I laugh every time at the DARE class. I just now knowing what I know, and back then, this. I mean, I remember sitting with all of our DARE t-shirts on in class, talking about drugs and how marijuana is the gateway drug. And yes, so I'm impressed that you kind of had this aha moment early on about the real value of the cannabis plant, or the true value. And it's more than just the health and wellness, right? And so tell me about the journey. What does it look like then? And where did you get, what does it look like, I guess, to get you to where you are now?
So I went to a couple different high schools, and I was involved with the arts, right? And so I'm a percussionist, and I play in drumline, and I've always had this kind of team effort sort of perspective, mentality, and I feel like we can get through things together. It's collaboration, cohesion. And I went to Emporia State, and I played in the drumline down there. It's where my wife, she was on the dance team. They made a movie about us. I'm just kidding. But it was at Emporia State that I really started understanding on a much deeper level why data is so crucial in understanding where we've been, how we got here, and where we're going. And so data to me is like that's my true passion. And it was in this matriculation I did at Emporia State, and I have a degree in communication. Emphasis is in public relations, but I have a minor in sociology. I've thought about getting a master's in science communication. We'll see about that. But what I'm getting at is it's that understanding and I guess appreciation for not only public policy, because my mother was also the executive assistant to 4 Senate presidents. And so I live in Topeka, which is the capital. So I've had an understanding of policy and how that all works from an early age. And so the melding of public health data and how all of these things are guided in our society has always fascinated me. And being able to kind of combine agriculture within our state, all of these things are intersecting always. You can't take the environment out of the individual and vice versa. And so that's that. It was around 2009. 2009 was when I graduated from Emporia State. So things have kind of progressed on since then.
Okay, well, very good. So I have to give a shout out to Melissa. Melissa Nelson says, "Hey, Kelly." And speaking of data and what she's been doing, she's also right along the same lines as you. And so when we talk about data and the number of points, right, it comes anywhere. What's been the most fascinating part for you in relation to hemp and the data that you've found or come across or experience? Talk to me about some of this that maybe people aren't aware of or should be talking about.
Okay, I appreciate you asking that. What I had discovered with my dad telling me about the research that he was a part of during the 70s, and K-State, mind you, it is the first land grant university in the United States. And so K-State has had a very rich tradition of agricultural research, understanding farming, agronomy, all of those related fields. And Kansas also occupies the largest intact region of the Great Plains. And so we've been known as the breadbasket. It's this glacial system we're in. But K-State has been involved with a long history of other types of research, and that included I uncovered some data that showed research and extension offices were part of the original eradication of marijuana in the 70s and prior to that. But it came down in Kansas when Governor Docking at that time, when President Nixon was president, he ordered the legislature to put in force a marijuana control steering committee. And from then, they established a law. It created it. They got federal funding from the Justice Department. And in Kansas, we had what is known, as I discovered in this Attorney General report, Kansas had the first eradication program of this type in the nation. And if you're from Kansas, you know about prohibition of alcohol. We had Kerr Nation and the temperance movement that really demonized alcohol, substances, people who use certain substances. And when prohibition ended in 1933, that kind of sentiment transitioned into people who use certain substances, including drugs. And, we know about all this, the history of the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, all of that. But what happened in Kansas was we kind of never let that go. We are still dealing, unfortunately, with some pushback as far as understanding that we can't arrest our way out of this problem, right? This is a public health issue. It needs to be dealt that way. The drug war needs to end, essentially. But the information, I guess, from Kansas that is really important to understand is that it's a collective effort. Researchers were shown data in Kansas. They went out to farmers. They asked them what they thought about a government-controlled hemp program, and farmers as a whole didn't support it. They didn't think it was a major problem, and they also thought it was a social issue, and that they didn't really need to have an eradication program. And so they ultimately kind of went against farmers in the beginning on all of this. And then they introduced a bunch of chemicals. And by the way, there is another thing I want to mention about this, is that those research extension agents studied, they knew about environments and habitats. And they knew that if they took away a shelter, a food source in hemp, bobwhite quail, other species, those were going to decline. They knew at that time that biodiversity was important, and if they changed those habitats, things would change. And yet they went ahead and
did it.
As we know, they did it, and they went against some data. And so I think it's important, and I'll share open full text so that everyone can see this. But I think it's also crucial to know other states had these similar programs. Kansas was the first, but there were 10 other states within this North Central Weed Control Conference that did these things. So
interesting. Okay, so when we talk about reintroducing it, right? What are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to reintroducing it back into Kansas?
So we're under a learning curve, just like every other state has been since they started their program. We now have a population that hasn't grown hemp for decades, and it's an ancient plant, as we know, and it has a lot of lessons. And so for certain, our planting, our harvesting, farmers have to know what's going to work for their operation specifically. Acclimated genetics is another crucial thing that we've got some really strong leaders in the state, Melissa on here being one of them, being able to provide the genetics that are going to work for certain end uses to farmers. That's the beginning of all of that. And then when you go to the clear end of the supply chain, Kansas didn't have necessarily the supply chain. We have infrastructure, and I think that's kind of where in time, Kansas is going to transition to really become a strong leader once again in hemp, because we have the infrastructure here. We just need a building of processing plants, everything that every state needs, right? Because we know that it's all local. It has to start locally. It will benefit economic development locally. So there are some hurdles that I think we are starting to see a transition. And so I will say that when Kansas first started out, 2019, that was the first year, over 90% of farmers grew for CBD, for floral and bud material extraction. That was already unfortunately a saturated market. There was a lot of still here that people are trying to get rid of. We've seen other things as a result, Delta 8 and all these other paths that folks have gone down. But, the farmers in Kansas traditionally are row crop farmers. And we've known since the beginning, and Kansas was the largest contributor of bushels per acre of hemp in 1863. We've cultivated hemp for end uses in the past. Shorter, bushier, highly labor intensive plants are not conducive to what Kansas farmers are able to grow on a large scale. It can be scalable, but I'm not sure that makes sense as a whole. And we think long term, Kansas is going to be a fiber, grain, but all of the end uses that can be made from that, right? Like, we also in Kansas have a very robust sorry, I'm trying to think of the word. We have a lot of different pockets of limestone, and a lot of them have been exploited. We've got quarries all over the state. Some of them have not been yet, but in order to make hempcrete, you have to have limestone. And so I think, we could be positioned pretty heavily to be a contributor in that realm. But of course, biocomposites and food for both animals and people, because Kansas also occupies the largest sector of the animal health corridor. So between K-State, Manhattan, Kansas, and Columbia, Missouri, that's where over half of the world's research and development in animal health is. And so it definitely, industrial hemp and cannabis will play a key role in that sector moving forward. And I've already had some pretty exciting conversations with folks about that. So you're gonna see some more of that, I think, here coming up. So I definitely be on the lookout for it.
I just don't think that that's something that's being talked about enough. Within our circle, yes, it is, because we get the value of the animal feed and those markets, but just the understanding and the sheer volume at which we would be able to aid those industries, and the amount of money spent or lack of food being able to be provided this year because of weather or hurricanes or COVID or transportation.
It's a very valid point, and that was kind of going to be one of my other points, in that farmers right now specifically need a drought resistant crop. And yes, there has been a pretty persistent rain season. I mean, our growing season Kansas has been lucky. Okay, we've been very lucky this year. People out west and central, they get that too, because Kansas has kind of flipped our drought outlook this year, because we've just had precipitation. That's not the case every year, and especially for non-irrigating farmers, we've got to have something that is going to withstand drought on a different level. And also, when we're talking about a value add, where soybeans, that's just one use. Corn, it's going to one use. Some of it, maybe even silage. So if hemp can at least provide 2, maybe even 3 value adds, that's just a game changer, in addition to being drought resistant. So yeah, I think, and if I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, and especially with the sustainability part, but when we're talking about sequestering carbon, Kansas with all of its acreage, we are going to be seeing, in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing out there, I think carbon credits are going to be a conversation, and knowing that hemp is a superior carbon sequester, that will be a continuing discussion.
I agree. I will. And I say all the time, carbon is going to be a new currency. It's just a topic. And some people are like, what? You don't know what you're talking about. So again, I feel like we talk a lot within our chamber, right? And the people that are in the industry get it, but there's this lack of education to the value of it. And I really think it also comes back to connecting the farm to what are we buying? What are we wearing? What are we eating? And it's just a massive disconnect that, yeah, it definitely is a hurdle when we talk about why aren't we? People that aren't in the industry say, well, if it's so great, then why aren't we using it? Well, there's this big disconnect for sure.
Yeah, the demand is here. I mean, the demand is absolutely here, and it can increase.
Mhm.
It will. Yeah.
So speaking of that, talking about the medical side, right? Medical cannabis and coming on the horizon and the effects that it may have on the hemp industry, right? I'm curious, where do you see that playing out and what hurdles may we see?
So as far as medical cannabis goes, I've been involved for the past 7 years working with the coalition and organizations that have been closely involved with writing legislation and working with lawmakers to get something happening. We had a shift last year, I would say, because it was no longer the conversation of these are patients, this is for the medical community, and it more from an advocacy side, but really a kind of shift of focus to economically, Kansas, it doesn't make sense for Kansas to no longer allow this. We've been exporting families' revenue to surrounding states for years now, and it's become a major problem for a lot of different reasons. But the lawmakers are understanding now, I think, the dollar signs. And of course, from the medical side, we know that adult use is going to be the larger end goal, or I guess end game on all of that. But allowing medical is still crucial, and because Kansas doesn't allow it for our patients, and we need to be able to protect the public health aspect of it, and being able to put programs in place that can put forth education and standards for labeling and all of these public health related areas. So anyway, I the groups that I'm now involved with and continue to have been, we are working to work with lawmakers on getting a good program through. There may be a separate piece of legislation that could possibly address social justice issues and some of the repairing of the damage from prohibition and the war on drugs. That's kind of what we're looking at right now, because to put everything into one bill may just be too much. But I will say that the bill that was passed last session in 2021 came from the House. It now sits in the Senate, and it is a bill originally modeled after Ohio's program. And so it has some nuances with it that I think can still be worked through. There was another bill that, though, at the very end of session that was introduced, and it is still active, and it would require dispensaries to only be pharmacies. And there isn't a pharmacy in Kansas that would agree to that I know of, but also that can't be done because it's Schedule 1 under the DEA scheduling. It's not, cannabis is not.
Utah is listed. Our dispensaries are pharmacies, but they're not pharmacies. Like, they're not medical pharmacies, but they're pharmacies, and they're not bud tenders. They're agents. And
so my understanding is so Utah created a separate kind of section, right? Yeah. That's not, and I could somewhat see that happening.
I just wonder if some of it is the terminology is to move to that direction, because it's definitely pushing it more on that state regulated, similar to our liquor laws.
Yeah. And that's, I could see that working in a way. Now, I will say that in Kansas right now, the Alcohol Bureau is, they're involved in these discussions, and so it's going to be interesting. I will just say that it will be fascinating to see how this all ends up, and and of course, we also know that anything that's put in place with cannabis, it will continue to evolve. It will, these policies are never set in stone. There's an advisory council. There's all these decision-making bodies, and so nothing ever stays the same. But I guess what from the coalition side, what we would like to see is not needing to waste taxpayer dollars to go back and fix a bill that maybe could have been written a little. Yeah. I mean, and it's making perfect policy the first time is that can be
hard,
not an unrealistic. It can be an unrealistic goal, but it's we at least have evidence to be able to follow best practice and say, hey, these are some examples that we can learn from and maybe do what we think is best. So hopefully we can put something together in early in 2022 or in January. That's when session starts in Kansas. So January, we can get something done early and get the ball rolling, because as we know, also these programs they're not put in place in a short fashion. They take a while. So yeah.
For sure. Okay, well, I want to give a real quick shout out to some people that are on here listening. Hello, Robert. He's from Northern Ireland, and he said once flax and linen center of the world and now growing industrial hemp. So that's pretty exciting. Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining. Mahima? Is that how you say that? I'm not even sure how to say that. This is a great question. What bill? Oh, write a bill that gets that will get a yes. Build from that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good insight.
Melissa, of course, says hello. John, hello. Benjamin's in Dallas. So I just wanted to give a real quick shout out. Okay, so when we were talking just now, let's see. What have been the most successful methods, or what has happened that's really driven, in your opinion, the most success when we talk about bridging the gap in education and bringing this topic, I guess, to the forefront? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that is a good question. Meeting people where they're at has been crucial. And one of the things I've learned in some of my leadership cohorts and just traveling the state is that we have to listen. And it's so cliche. Everyone is like, it's all about listening. Is number one. You have to understand where people are coming from in order to have a discussion, in order to see where they're coming from on certain topics. So what we did before legalization in Kansas, at Kansans for Hemp, we toured the state. We went to these communities and had open discussions with farmers and community members about their concerns, what they thought industrial hemp was, what, marijuana actually is, cannabis is, all of it. It's, these types of things that it's the whole misperception and misinformation that people consume on a daily basis, but they have to get outside of that. And we have to look at the holistic weight of evidence. I mean, in a previous career, I was trained by CDC and in risk communication and data research. And so you have to look at the whole comprehensive weight of evidence and not just one study, one resource and all of that. You have to be looking at all of these perspectives and in order to really understand. So I think, getting out there, understanding where people's concerns are, that will help us to be able to support them the best. And I like to work with people that do that and show that, we can work together through these things, I guess.
Great advice. I say this all the time when we talk about education, and I talk about moving this needle and bridging this gap is, where do we meet our farmers? Are farmers going to be on Zoom calls? Are they going to be traveling? Or are they going to be on their tractor or in their community, servicing their community? And so I absolutely can support, meeting people where they are.
And not everyone learns the same way either. There are so many ways that people learn better. Some are tactile, some are auditory learners, some better, they consume information better with the podcast while they're running or whatever. But being able to be in those spaces that people occupy. Yeah.
Well, and hemp is so diverse, right? That it really is hitting, I guess, that market is who is that target market and where are they? I love the advice of figuring out, what the need is. Somebody on one of our calls one day said, you see a lot of times people from other industries come into, say, the textile space trying to solve a problem that really isn't a problem. But they come in thinking that they have this answer solution, and then it's discarded, and it probably was a good idea, but wrong time or wrong way to approach the market.
Yep, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that feedback. So what organizations out there would you say, I know the one couple that you're involved in, but who else is really doing it right? Who else can you give shout out to that really is moving the needle and making change?
So in Kansas, there are, I would say, some key people that are definitely moving the needle and making some strong strides. We're looking at there's South Bend Industrial Hemp, Ad Astra Seed Company, Tallgrass Hemp and Cannabis, and Midwest Hemp Technology. Also Canico. There's
there's a lot.
there's multiple ones and multiple farmers that, and I'm not even mentioning, like we had quite a few licenses and they've dwindled down, but the ones that have put a stake in the ground and said we're going to do this, they're making a go of it, and it's exciting to see. I mean, I'm trying to think of more. There are multiple ones out there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I froze. I was really embarrassed. My dogs are making lots of noise, so I apologize, everybody. I must have knocked. Hey, knock it off. I must have knocked or something, and I think people are at the door now. But I had somebody ask me one day, give somebody a shout out. Want to give a few of your members shout out? And I was like, I froze. And so as people come up, or if somebody else comes up, feel free to give them a shout out. I'd love to hear from it. Or later on, I'd love to interview them and highlight people that are doing it right. A couple of the people that you did already mention, Southbound Hemp and Midwest Hemp Technology, are both members. And so doing great things, spreading the word and joining our conversations often. So that's pretty exciting. We talked about the hemp market in Kansas, right? Can you give me an idea of what acreage and volume and maybe what the end markets? We talked a little bit about like the fiber grain, but do you have any specifics as far as maybe end products that you see being manufactured or really developed?
So right now, because we're still kind of in that transition stage, and our commercial program didn't even really get started until 2020, and of course that year was kind of, as we know, kind of nuts. It's still very heavily on the extraction side. So we see products out there that are CBD tinctures. There are a lot more products that are pet related, I know, that are available, but I will also say this has come at the same time of a commercialization. So you can go to Walgreens and get, CBDMD and, all of these big time players. And so it isn't all of the smaller producers are needing to compete with these larger companies who already, kind of had been established. And so it's really hard. I was with a CBD producer and I helped them launch during the pandemic. And that was a very difficult time. And so, but we're starting to get into the more, of course there are topicals, all methods of administration, I guess, for CBD you can get. And the one of the other, though, kind of complexities is that in Kansas you cannot sell bud material, and so that's not being enforced. And so it's interesting that we've got this situation where gas stations, you can buy floral, like packages of eights and pre-rolls and things like that, and it's technically unlawful.
Are they selling? Are you seeing a lot of Delta 8?
There's a lot of Delta 8 products, and those, from my understanding, are not made in Kansas. I mean, I think, well, no, I shouldn't say that. Some of them are being made here, or at least formulated in the state. But we are seeing a lot of those types of products. Even Delta 8, like I've seen packages of Delta 8 flour that's obviously, I mean, it's sprayed with a chemical that it has been a product of extraction. But there's a lot of things going on here that I don't think it's completely unregulated. I mean, we know that, and that's again another reason why we need to be regulating these things, and also decriminalizing it. Like we can't be criminalizing people for growing a plant. I hear from farmers all the time, because I'm an appointed member on the hemp advisory board for the state, and so I hear from farmers all the time saying, "Why are we paying license fees to grow something that we've acknowledged is legal, but we're not treating it like any other crop, like soybean or corn, where they don't require any special license?" So yeah, there's still some hurdles to get over.
Okay, so Ryan had a great question. I was going to ask this next, Ryan. So wonderful, but how do we help you? What are your current needs, and how do people get involved?
That's a great question. So I am the founding president of a group called Planted Association of Kansas. And we've been around since 2019, and we've kind of, pretty much laid low. Our name doesn't have the word hemp in it, and that was intentional. We want to be a body in the state where folks can go to learn about industrial hemp and other regenerative industries. And we have multiple partners that we've been working with, and we're getting a website we're working through some issues, but ultimately we want to be the go-to and trusted source for introducing people, and also advocating for the hemp industry, and being able to connect them to people that can help them grow, process, whatever it is. And we also want to help people. I think a long-term goal is we would very much like to be a conduit for support for the industry. So that means being able to come to us for funding, for scholarships, for who knows what it may end up turning into. We have had this dream, though, of being able to support farmers in the industry who want to do what's best for their communities. And so, Planted Association of Kansas is, like I said, working with a lot of different organizations on multiple aspects of the industries that hemp contributes to. And we love to work with whoever we can. The association is members of Midwest Hemp Council and the U.S. Hemp Building Association, and we're open to collaborating with any and everyone who have mutual and aligned shared goals. So like I said, I'm also co-founder of Kansans for Hemp, and the Kansas Cannabis Coalition is the other body that's working on medical cannabis and other aspects of cannabis.
Awesome. Well, I would love to chat about collaborating. I firmly believe that the industry needs collaboration if we're going to move forward. We have all these little groups and all these little organizations holding key pieces to our puzzle, and now we've got to be able to bring them together. And what does that look like? And what does the roadmap moving forward look like as an industry when there is a lot of push to want to be the best and the top and the first, and changing that paradigm to be a collaboration. And yeah,
that's what, and that you hit on a really good, important point. I don't know how much time we have. It's an important thing, and it's something I learned back at going to conferences in Colorado. I went out there and I was just so enthralled with just the level of willingness to share and to bring people in to it's like a family. It is a family because everyone, it's an abundance mindset, and there is room for everyone. I love Midwest Hemp Council. They talk about co-opetition. It isn't necessarily about competition. It's we can work through these things together. You can have your piece. We can even do some of the same things together and work through adversity. And that's how it's going to work in the long run. And Kansans also know that. Deep down, we know that it's a long game, and you've got to put in the time and effort and want to help others to be able to make it work. And we've got some really great partners on the path. So I'm excited to see what happens next.
I love it. So what else do you think people should be paying attention to? Right? Where should people be focusing that maybe we're not? I've said for a long time, we're behind on the grain discussion and the, hemp for feed and food discussion. But, what else? What do you see? You're much more into the policy side.
Well, I do agree with, we need a designation, and I know some folks, yes, Ryan, together as a community, absolutely. The whole nutritional aspect of hemp is slowly being, it's slowly getting to the point where it needs to be. We need FDA approval. We need acknowledgement from the federal level that says, yes, but in their defense, they're saying we need data. And so there's a lot of good research that's happening right now. Some of it in Kansas with K-State University. We need a normalization. And I know we've been saying that for so long, but it's just having conversations with people about why this is good for us versus some of what we're putting into our bodies right now. And, making that stark comparison and kind of not really getting in people's faces about it. But I do think that I think we can transition to a different, it's kind of like the period for education is ongoing, right? But we can change our tactics, I think, some to really get at folks. So I don't know.
Well, I'm curious about what all of those are, and I'm always eager to learn because I'm with you that normalizing the conversation and changing the stigma that people that use cannabis are lazy or this reefer madness, to look at these successful people that are using cannabis in every aspect: granola bars, lotion, clothing, food, planting it, not just consuming it or smoking it. And so it's yeah,
exactly. You're absolutely right. And it's that it is the stigma. It's the lingering stigma that we have. And Kansas is very steeped in it still. The reason that we don't sell flower is because one person that I saw in a meeting convinced other leadership in the ag departments that ag committees that if they took away, if they allowed the sale of flower in Kansas, it would take away law enforcement's ability to search for probable cause. And in my brain, I thought, yes, that's what we want. That's right. Where we're on the same page now. Yes, let's go ahead and get to that. But they voted that down, and so that's why Kansas doesn't allow the sale of flower. But see, it's this mindset of cannabis is illegal because it's bad, and it's also the equivalent to heroin, which is just the same. And we can't go down this road. It's a slippery slope, like you said, gateway argument, all of those things.
We talk about this a lot too. When you say like grapes grapes and wine. Wine is regulated differently than grapes are. Poppies are regulated different than heroin, right? Cannabis or hemp grown in the field should be regulated very different than what is taken out of the plant and how it is processed. Right?
Yeah.
There's a big difference there in understanding that Delta 8, this Delta 8 bubble or gray space, and that even though it was extracted from hemp originally, it's no longer hemp once it's been taken out, right? And what that
and it all goes back to the history of why THC became it put in law or in legal terms in the first place. It never should have been. You know, we all know that the Canadian researchers that studied that and published that report, they came back and said this never should have been put into statute. And we don't take an element out of corn and say we're gonna, you know, if you have this percentage, it's not to grow corn, even though alcohol can be, you know, whiskey can be made from it, whatever. So,
right.
Yeah. And this, again, this goes back to the research that I uncovered at K-State. They knew back then in the 70s, just even a few years after Raphael Mechoulam synthesized THC. So this is pretty groundbreaking. They evaluated the level of cannabinoids in wild Kansas hemp plants. And so they knew back then, that was one of their conclusions of one of the studies, is that they knew there was a specific drug type or a fiber type, which now that's not it's a misnomer because hemp does have therapeutic properties, but they knew that what was out there growing wild in Kansas was not quote unquote marijuana or high THC cannabis. They knew that,
right.
But they went ahead. I mean, law enforcement went ahead and said, we're going to outlaw all of it.
It's the leaf. It's in the leaf. Don't you know? I mean, that right there is a perfect example of the education, right? If I say the word cannabis, people assume marijuana or reefer madness, or if you show the cannabis leaf, they assume that it's, what we know, when it is so much more. And I got to go harvest some cool fields or watch actually a harvest. I really didn't do anything. I rode in the tractor so I can kind of claim it, but that was it. But it was fascinating, 15 to 20 feet tall plants, and it's beautiful. It's like a jungle. It is not it's not what we've been sold at all. And so, getting that message out is definitely my goal, and would love to help support however we can. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what else do you see on the horizon? What else do you see for Kansas and for future of, and maybe what you're working on next?
We're definitely gearing up for the session to start. So session in Kansas, the legislature goes back in January, and there are a lot of meetings happening right now regarding just medical cannabis as a whole, but there are some changes that still need to happen to the industrial hemp program. And so, my understanding also is that the commercial hemp program it has been adopted, and our changes to the USDA that I guess incorporated the USDA changes that were from earlier, that's been okayed. And so all of our programming is enforced now, and we do have the provisions such as effective disposal, and there's now the new negligence threshold of 1% THC. I mean, so we had specifically worked on some things last year, and the Kansas Department of Ag's Industrial Hemp Advisory Board had worked on some things, and that's all been approved now, and things are moving forward, which is really exciting. And so I'm kind of looking forward to ironing out some of these industry issues that deal with funding for processors, and really kind of elevating the conversation of, okay, this is here and now, let's go ahead and support this the way that it needs to be. And that includes things like, giving a possible program for incentive for people who want to farm hemp in the state or process, and whether that comes through tax credits programs. Also, people who would like to purchase hemp products that are made in the state. We need to kind of incentivize that too, and I think having those discussions would be good. So I don't know. There's a lot I think that we need to work towards policy wise, but just on the personal level, just having talks and talking about things with folks. I presented at K-State at a class here a couple of weeks back, and so just trying to continue the conversations.
I really like what you were saying about incentivizing, to buy when it's grown locally. It speaks volumes even to the consumer market, and where the consumer is willing to put their dollar when they know that story, and being able to bring the manufacturing back to the farm, really connecting those dots.
Yeah, there's something that I've been kind of made aware of recently, and we've just had some amazing programs in place that attract businesses, and we have the Small Business Development Center, all of these programs and systems in force. We also need to be focusing on the farmers that are here who are wanting to transition and help them in a way, and they're in multiple ways really, because we can attract all the business we want from out of state, but really, like we've said, everything is local, and the economic development aspect, all of that is going to remain local first and most prominently. And so we need to be able to kind of transition maybe some programs and thinking about what that will look like in the rural and especially frontier counties.
Absolutely. We've got to, especially where the oil and gas has been so taken back, right? I lived out in the Vernal Roosevelt area, Uinta Basin, it's tribal ground, but this is awesome opportunity for them to bring a revenue source and to keep those kids on their farms and in their communities, right? So I really like incentivizing we have a Utah's own or Utah grown program, being able to do something similar. I like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Neil's got a really good question. So he said, it's too bad the industry of hemp versus flower THC remains confused. In Kansas, what might be the total processing intake in 2021 and what might be the online by 2022? Good question, Neil.
So the question is about hemp versus flower. And the processing intake, as far as extraction, I think, if I'm understanding this question, what's the total processing intake for extract like biomass? It's kind of hard to tell at this point, because those farmers who had been growing for CBD, high CBD and extraction products, those have decreased. Acreage, we're talking plant count at that point, because there are some grows. That's a really good question. It's not much, I can tell you that. I don't think the total intake for CBD is going to be too much.
What about fiber? Like, where are you at for the fiber processing and now compared to 2022?
And honestly, that's going to be a Department of Ag question, because right now they are the only ones that have that data, and it hasn't been shared. So you can talk to certain farmers, like Melissa Nelson, she contracts with multiple farmers. And so they have so many acres per farmer, and they would be able to tell you, at least within their, cohort, how many acres they're growing. But honestly, total acreage in the state that has already been planted and is in cultivation, only the Department of Agriculture knows that. And they were sharing that information during the research program, but they no longer have that requirement, is my understanding. So they're not doing that. So that's also one of the kind of goals of Planted Association is really to be a conduit for sharing information like that with folks. So I wish I had a different answer, quite honestly. I don't. And so our goal is to get a better handle on it.
Awesome. I'd love to collaborate with you on that. That's something too we've talked a lot about. So however we can, again, it's funny because I think every group and everybody that we know has pieces of this puzzle to fit together and resources. There's another gentleman that I've met that has a great platform to do research and old news bank and news articles and attached to universities. And so I'd love to at least, help connect there, because if you understand better what you're looking for, then, we've got some tools and resources, where sometimes I still wonder, I just don't know what I don't know. I lean on people like you. I need the experts.
Well, likewise, it's, we all have our strengths and our passions. So, yep.
Do you have an FOIA equivalent? What is an FOIA?
Freedom of Information Act. I've never formally submitted. What I do is I work through sources such as libraries. I have a state library card. The people who I've worked with to do all of this, they have been very willing and open because that's their job, and that's what librarians do. And I'm. Yeah, so I don't know. I've never had to submit an FOIA, but I wouldn't be surprised if I come across something that requires it. So not at this point.
Awesome. Well, that's good, and it's good to know. It's funny when people say, "Well, there's just no information out there." It is. It's a matter of finding it and where to find it.
That's the key. You are absolutely right, Mandi. Knowing what to look for and where to look for it, and mastering the resources to find it. That's what it's all about.
And then validating it, right? There's a lot of misinformation out there. If
a lot
you up and figure out that the sky's green, you'll find it. It's out there, I'm sure,
Yeah, well, and I'm on the camp of, we can't do our own research when it comes to science. We've got to look at the holistic picture.
Reed said they're usually online and easy to do. It's amazing what you can get. So you want the acres, numbers, submit that.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great point. If there's ever any, now I will say that, there is information that the Department of Agriculture won't release because it goes against their record, their Kansas Records Act law. So I know that that's kind of one of the reasons why they've been a little leery of sharing information. But you're absolutely right. We should know number of licenses, acres planted, acres harvested, all of those types of things. So yeah, I totally agree, and I appreciate that.
Can you get that through a grammar request also, like through the state? I'm assuming it's something similar where you just request and the state releases it based on record of release, probably.
Yeah, and it would just be a request to the Department of Ag, I think, at this point. But yeah,
it's a matter of joining forces and gathering the documents and then filtering out who of those that hold license actually grew or processed, what they grow for and sell for it. I actually have a link right now that we put out and are sharing on behalf of Heartland. Heartland is really putting in effort to try to help farmers get insurance and the support they need. So they're collecting the data to show, back to those services. But looking for just exactly that information. What was grown? How was it grown? What was the volume? What are some numbers we can put behind this so next year's growing season can be insured? And
right. No, and we have to have that. Yeah, you've got to have that information. Farmers have to have that. It's absolutely crucial. And I love tracking all of it is going to be, you can't measure something you don't know. And statistics show what the true story is. So, no, the last time I had spoke with the Department of Agriculture, they had not yet calculated the total acreage of planted. I think they were still waiting on some reports. That was back in August. So hopefully by now they would have all of that. But it may all just also be a systematic thing. Like, hey, could we set up a monthly report, where we could just get a monthly, we don't want to make more work for folks, but it is important to disseminate that information to people. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, and again, it's this, people don't know where to go to get the information. So we're seeing the same mistakes being made over and over again. And yeah, we can avoid a lot of that loss. So I would like to open up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just going to say
I was just going
to. You go.
My fault. I wanted to pull up the data that I did have available. In 2019, when we started out, we had 197 licenses, and that totaled to about 5,000, just a little over 5,000 acres that was grown in 2019. Right now in 2021, we have 87 licenses. And so, the amount of acreage has definitely decreased overall. We know that. However, I think the transition from more floral and CBD to the row crop grain and fiber varieties, we're going to see an increase of acreage.
I bet in the next couple of years, it's exponential, because we go from then high number of licensed and small number of acres to massive acreage. As soon as we're able to nail down our seeds and our genetics and what's growing where for what end product, what process, right? But
exactly.
Yeah, I definitely see a little bit of a lull even after we get processing on, because then it's trying to figure out, well, what genetics are best for that processing,
right?
For that end product and so forth. So yeah, we'll see some move around. But I was going to say, for everybody else, I did post, or we have a link. If you go to hemphallway.com, that's our community platform. There is a pop-up that has the link to the survey for farmers. And so hemphallway.com, and then Kelly, you're welcome to share that as well. It's just being collected. And then that will be shared publicly for everybody to use or have. But Heartland is doing it really just because they need their farmers. They need to be able to ensure that they've got crop, right, to fulfill this demand now. And so it's this really an all hands on deck to take care of the farm, because ultimately we won't be anywhere without them. Cool. Well, Kelly, thank you very much. Anything else you want to say? How do people get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you? Or
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Kelly Rippel, and I'm also on Twitter. My cannabis account is greenthumb _1 ONE, and also Kansans for hemp with an N, KANASANS for hemp. We're on Facebook and Twitter. So Kansans for Hemp is out there trying to share information as well. Planted Association of Kansas, we don't have a social media account. We just have a website right now. But our partners are very much out there as well. Melissa Nelson Baldwin with South Bend Hemp. She's all on the Instagram and doing all the amazing things. You can email me, kellyrippel@ymail.com. And like I said, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, and would love to collaborate. And again, thank you for having me, Mandi. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, Kelly. Thank you so much. Let's continue this conversation. And if at any time we get to connect and actually meet face to face, I would love to. I don't know if you're traveling or heading to any events coming up or speaking at any. Do you have any on your calendar?
Not yet. Nope. I am just going through certification for crop adjusting, and so I will be picking that up here pretty quickly. But again, the winter and all that's coming up, so things may change. We'll have to see. But virtually, definitely anytime.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate it. And if we do get to connect, let's do that. We'll let people know where we're going to be. We'll do a little live interview or something cool there. But thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch you guys next time. Actually, next week. I've got a couple. Okay. See you later, Kelly.